It was during the spring break of my second year in college when I got a call from my Uncle David. He asked if I could come stay at his place for a few days. My grandfather had been sick for a long time, and at this point, the doctors weren't focused on treating him anymore, just on keeping him as comfortable as possible for whatever time he had left. I couldn't imagine a worse situation for anyone involved. Grandpa, stuck in a house that wasn't his own, facing the end with only a son he barely spoke to anymore, and then there was David, who had lost his girlfriend 7 months ago when she died giving birth to their daughter. Now, on top of grieving and raising an infant alone, he had to care for a dying man. I'd like to say I offered to help out of pure kindness, out of some deep-rooted family loyalty, but the truth was, it had been a long time since I'd last spoken to David, and even longer since I'd spoken to my grandfather. No, I went because I was lonely, achingly, unbearably lonely. I had no real friends in college, and after my mom passed away last year, there wasn't a single person left for me to talk to. I said yes because I craved some form of human connection. And, honestly, I didn't expect to do much besides keeping the baby entertained when David needed a break and fetching whatever Grandpa might need. David's house was out in the middle of nowhere, at least a 40-minute drive from the nearest town. Most of my family lived scattered around the rural county, so there wasn't much nearby, just long, empty roads and the occasional building. From the outside, his place looked like any other two-story home standing alone in the countryside. Nothing special. I rang the doorbell, and after a few moments, David opened the door. He didn't look much different from the last time I saw him in person. "Ah, Jake, how've you been?" "I really appreciate you coming out here," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. "Yeah, well, it's not like I had anything better to do," I admitted with a shrug. He chuckled. "Fair enough. Come on in. Hang your jacket up over there. Want some coffee?" "Sure," I said. "All right, go ahead and take a seat in the living room. First door on your left." I followed his directions, stepping inside and taking a proper look around. Now that I was inside, I could see that David's house had a lot more character than it seemed at first glance. There was a smell of old books mixed with something faintly musty, the kind of scent that clings to places where time has settled in. The entryway was wide and dim, with heavy curtains blocking out most of the daylight. The place had a quiet rhythm to it, from the creaking of the wooden floors beneath my feet to the soft echo of David's footsteps down the hall. The interior felt older than the exterior suggested, with patterned wallpaper that had seen better days and an old-fashioned chandelier hanging above. But in contrast, the furniture and art pieces were modern, like someone had tried to update the place but didn't quite manage to hide its age. It was like putting a fresh coat of paint over something crumbling underneath. The living room was cozy enough. A couch with slightly peeling fabric, a worn-out rug, and bookshelves filled with dusty volumes that hadn't been touched in ages. It felt like a place frozen in time, musty but lived in, like the walls had soaked up years of family history. A minute later, David came in with 2 mugs of coffee. I sipped mine slowly as we made awkward small talk. "Damn, you've grown up. It's been, 2 years? At least 5, but I didn't correct him. We kept up the conversation for a bit until he shifted gears to what needed to be done over the next few days. "I'll be bringing Grandpa home from the hospice tomorrow after work. We probably won't be back until around 7. Chloe's upstairs napping right now, so I'm going to get started on dinner. In the meantime, make yourself at home. There are 2 empty rooms upstairs, pick whichever one you want." He clapped me on the shoulder before heading toward the kitchen. "Really, Jake, I appreciate this. Babysitters are expensive, and I could use the help." I headed upstairs, passing what had to be David's bedroom. It had a double bed and a crib beside it, where the baby slept soundly. The room, like the rest of the house, tried to look modern but couldn't quite hide its true age. I had a pile of college assignments waiting for me, so I pulled out my laptop and sociology textbook and spent most of the evening studying, only taking a break when dinner was ready. Over dinner, we had another somewhat forced conversation about college. Spoiler, I wasn't exactly thriving there. From where I sat at the dining table, I noticed a grimy golden retriever roaming around the yard. I hadn't seen it before and was a little surprised David could handle a dog on top of everything else. As I half-heartedly poked at my pork chops, something else caught my attention. In the corner of the room, almost hidden behind an old bookshelf, was a small door I hadn't noticed before. The way the dim light hit it made the wood seem almost off, like it shimmered slightly, not entirely solid. Something about it unsettled me. "Hey, is that a closet?" I asked, pointing at the door. Andrew glanced over his shoulder before shaking his head quickly. "Oh, that? No, it is just a small, unused space in the house. I have not figured out what to do with it yet." He forced a smile, but there was something off about it. I was about to press him for more details when the dog outside started barking loudly. "God, what is his deal?" I muttered. Andrew let out a tired sigh. "Hey, you never mentioned having a dog." "Seems like a lot to handle with everything else going on," I said. "Nah, he is not mine. Just some stray that has been showing up around the yard lately for some reason." That was the end of the conversation, but I remember thinking it was strange that a stray had a collar. I decided to turn in a couple of hours later, but getting any real sleep was a challenge. The dog barked on and off through the night, making sure I never got more than a few minutes of rest at a time. By the time morning rolled around, Andrew had already left for work. He had scribbled out some instructions on a piece of paper in the kitchen about taking care of Chloe. I had babysat before when I was younger, so I knew the drill, but that did not make changing diapers any less miserable. Other than that, the day passed without much excitement. At one point, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check out the hidden door behind the bookshelf. It was locked. I gave it a couple of half-hearted tugs but did not think much of it. Andrew had said it was just some unused space, and I was not about to get weird about it. When Andrew came home that evening, he was pushing Grandpa in a wheelchair, and I immediately understood just how sick the old man was. He had stage 3 skin cancer that had spread aggressively through his torso. Later that night, Andrew told me he probably had 2 weeks left, at most. The sight of him was jarring. His skin was so pale and loose that it looked like it had been inflated and deflated 100 times over. His head was little more than a skull with patches of thin, white hair clinging to it. I had been hoping we could have some kind of conversation, given that I had barely known him growing up, but it was clear that was not going to happen. He could hardly string a sentence together, mostly communicating through mumbles, grunts, and vague gestures. That evening felt even more uncomfortable than the last. I buried myself in my coursework, figuring Grandpa would rather be with Andrew anyway. They had barely seen each other in years, so maybe this was their time to reconnect, if that was even possible. Eventually, I went to bed early, but sleep did not come easy. That damn dog was at it again, barking nonstop into the night. I ended up staying another week at Andrew's place, but I will not go into every detail, since none of it really changes where I am now. Andrew still had to work, so I spent most of my days watching Chloe and making sure Grandpa took his medication. The only consistent words that ever came out of his mouth were complaints about the pain he was in. The skin. My muscles. The flesh. I had heard from my mother, not my father, that Grandpa had not been kind to him and Andrew when they were younger. He was a Vietnam veteran, and the war had followed him home in the form of a bottle and all the violence that came with it. Even knowing that, I could not help but feel a pang of pity for him. Whatever he had done in his younger years, nothing could be worse than the suffering he was going through now. All I could do was urge him to take his pills and hope they made things easier. On the second night with Grandpa in the house, I woke up again to that damn dog barking outside. It went on for what felt like forever, and when it finally stopped, I let out a sigh of relief and started drifting back to sleep. But just as I was slipping into unconsciousness, I heard Grandpa muttering in the next room. I had gotten used to his incoherent ramblings throughout the day, and the walls in the house were thin, so I did not pay much attention at first. Then I heard another voice, Andrew's. Whispering. Just loud enough to make out. No. I told you already, it is not happening. Get it out of your head. You know you have to, Grandpa responded, his voice dry and creaky, like an old wooden floorboard. But unlike before, he sounded startlingly lucid. I do not remember hearing anything else. The door to Grandpa's room opened softly, then shut again, and whatever was going on, I did not have the energy to think about it for long before exhaustion pulled me under. The next day, I decided to bring it up to Andrew when we had a moment alone. Hey, sorry if I'm prying, but I heard you and Grandpa talking last night. It kind of sounded like an argument. I asked. Andrew let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temple before answering. Look, you have probably figured out by now that this house is a lot older than you thought. The truth is, it used to belong to him, your father, and I grew up here. He's just not happy with how I have been taking care of things. You know how older guys get about that kind of stuff. He looked like he regretted saying that, like he had said too much, and the silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. Before I could ask anything else, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. Come on, man. Chloe finally fell asleep, and I would rather not wake her up. Let's call it a night. I could tell he did not want to talk about it any further, so I let it go. On the bright side, there was no barking from the dog that night, or any of the nights that followed. At the very least, I finally got some decent sleep. The next day passed in a fog of unease. The weight of something unspoken filled the house, growing heavier with each passing hour. Grandpa stayed locked away in his room, hunched in his wheelchair, mumbling to himself in a voice too low to understand. Andrew and I moved around him like shadows, delivering his meals, administering his pills, sharing silent looks that spoke volumes. Neither of us dared to address the tension directly. That night, another argument broke through the stillness, muffled by the thin walls but carrying a venom that made my skin crawl. You're a fool. Always were. I know what you did last night. You think that's enough? It has to be me. You don't deserve it. You treated us like dirt. It doesn't matter if I deserve it. It has to be me, and it has to be tomorrow. Grandpa's words sent a shiver through me. I lay awake long after their voices faded, staring at the ceiling, dreading the morning. The next day, Grandpa's door was locked from the inside. Andrew called in sick to work. When I saw him, he looked like a man who had lost a fight in his sleep. I wanted to ask what had happened last night, but I held back, sensing that whatever weight he carried, it wasn't something he was ready to share. We barely crossed paths. I only heard him moving around the house, whispering to Chloe, unlocking and relocking Grandpa's door every few hours to administer his medication. Dinner was eaten in silence. Finally, Andrew came to me. You heard us last night, didn't you? His voice was hollow. I nodded. He sighed heavily, rubbing his face as if he could wipe away exhaustion itself. I guess you deserve to know at least this much. I doubt your parents ever told you before they were gone. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might break down entirely. Your father and I had a younger sister once. Phoebe. I was 8 when she was born. Your old man was 11. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I'd never heard that name before. Not once. She went missing when she was 5, he continued, voice strained. Just vanished. Without a trace. They never found her. Dad started drinking harder after that. I had no response. What could I say? That I was sorry? That it made no sense? That I still didn't understand? Tomorrow, Andrew swallowed thickly, is the anniversary of her disappearance. That's why he's like this. That's why it hurts so bad today. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm sorry, I murmured. I had no idea. No one ever told me. Andrew wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. You shouldn't have needed to know. He turned toward the stairs, pausing just before ascending. Look, if you hear anything from him tonight, if I have to go in there again, just ignore it. Please. His voice cracked. It hurts enough as it is. Then he was gone, retreating behind his bedroom door. I sat there, numb. What else didn't I know? What else had been buried in silence? But despite everything I had learned, I still didn't understand what was really happening in this house. Grandpa's cryptic words echoed in my head. It has to be me. Why? What had Andrew done? What was it? Sleep didn't come easily. My mind was an endless cycle of questions, circling the same unsettling truths over and over. And when I finally did drift off, I was ripped from my rest one last time, not by barking, not by voices, but by slow, heavy footsteps descending the stairs. Andrew had begged me not to get involved, to ignore it, to stay in my room. But something inside me refused to listen. I crept to my door, easing it open. The hallway was dark, the air thick with something I couldn't name. The first thing I noticed was Grandpa's bedroom door, open and empty. The footsteps continued, steady, deliberate, heading toward the kitchen. I followed. The kitchen was dim, only faintly illuminated by the glow of the stovetop clock. And that's when I saw it, the thing I had overlooked every single day I had been here. The door behind the bookshelf. Wide open. A pit formed in my stomach. I abandoned all pretense of caution, rushing toward it. This wasn't some crawl space. It wasn't some forgotten storage room. It was a staircase. Leading down. My breath hitched as I descended, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. At the bottom, there was another door. I pressed my ear against it, and a sickening realization settled in my bones. Something was breathing on the other side. Deep, slow, laborious breaths. And beneath that, something else. A low, pulsing vibration. Like the door itself was alive. The handle burned under my grip, but I turned it anyway. The door swung open. Andrew stood in the center of the cellar, bathed in the dim light of a single bulb. He was gripping a kitchen knife. But there was no sign of Grandpa. My mouth went dry. Andrew. He barely acknowledged me. His gaze was fixed straight ahead, toward the far wall. Only, it wasn't a wall. It was flesh. A grotesque, pulsating mass of red-brown tissue stretched across the far side of the cellar. The drywall at the edges seemed to dissolve into it, as if the house itself had begun to merge with whatever nightmare lay before me. The surface shuddered and oozed, heaving like something alive. Sweat beaded along its grotesque ridges. The smell was unbearable, rancid, putrid, thick enough to choke on. The room spun around me. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. Andrew didn't move. He just stood there, knife in hand, staring into the quivering abyss before him. And for the first time, I understood that whatever I had walked into, whatever secrets this house held. I was too late. I could barely think. The sight of it made me feel like I'd lost my grip on reality, like I had stumbled into some waking nightmare, my thoughts locked away behind an impenetrable wall of terror. What the hell? I choked out. What the hell is this? Andrew! What the hell is this? Where's Grandpa? He turned to me as if coming out of a trance, his eyes still fixed on the wall for a moment longer. He was right, he murmured, more to himself than to me. Then he looked at me directly, his expression unreadable. It had to be done. I followed his gaze back to the sickening, pulsating mass before us. No. He couldn't mean. No. Andrew, where's Grandpa? What did you do? My voice cracked as I forced the words out, unwilling to accept what I already knew deep down. Andrew stared at the wall again, a look of something almost reverent on his face. It's what he wanted. No. You're lying. I bellowed, the denial spilling out even as my stomach twisted with certainty. What the hell even is this? He didn't flinch, didn't look away. I inherited it, I suppose. The wall suddenly flexed outward, an obscene, heaving movement accompanied by a deep, grumbling noise. I saw something flicker in Andrew's eyes, concern. The thing was hungry again. Grandpa hadn't been enough. Then, slicing through the grumble, a sound that sent ice through my veins. Chloe, crying from upstairs. Andrew's head snapped up toward the ceiling. Then, his eyes landed on me. Don't, I whispered, but he was already moving. Andrew, don't. I lunged to block the door, but he shoved me aside with terrifying strength. I threw myself at him, grasping at the knife in his hand, but he was too strong. He wrenched free and slashed down, the blade biting into my leg. Pain exploded through me, hot and searing. I collapsed, howling. You know what? His voice was low, almost amused. This is even better. You're far more useful anyway. I understood what he meant in an instant. He grabbed me by the legs, dragging me toward the writhing, living wall. No, I gasped. No, Andrew, please. Then I was inside it. The mass wrapped around me, tendrils slithering across my skin, piercing through me without pain, burrowing deep. I could feel it. Feel it absorbing me, connecting me to something vast and incomprehensible. For a brief, terrible moment, I understood. I was becoming part of it, a thread in the fabric of something ancient and insatiable. Then, darkness. I don't know how long I was gone. But when I returned to myself, it was like surfacing from the deepest part of the ocean. I was weightless. Detached. I could feel everything and nothing at once. Then, something foreign. Something cold. I've got you. I've got you. I fell forward into someone's arms. The cellar air hit me like a shockwave, freezing, biting. I screamed. I looked up. Men in yellow hazmat suits surrounded me, cutting me free from the pulsing wall. My body trembled uncontrollably, the cold searing into me after so long immersed in something warm, something living. I barely registered them strapping me onto a stretcher, injecting me with something that sent me spiraling into unconsciousness. I woke up in containment, a sterile white room with no windows. They questioned me for hours, men in suits, voices flat and unshaken. Their questions made no sense, as if they already knew what had happened but needed to hear it from me. Then, just like that, they let me go. They never found Andrew. Emily had called the police after I failed to answer my phone for days. In the end, she was the one who took me home. Whatever secret part of the government handled horrors like this swept it all away. Life moved on. I tried to forget. I tried to pretend. I married Emily. We had a daughter, Lily. I told myself I was fine. That it was over. But it was never over. Years later, in the quiet of our bedroom, I told Emily the truth. That I still saw it in my dreams. That I woke up gasping, feeling phantom tendrils against my skin. That I couldn't stand the sight of open wounds without feeling like I was sinking back into that wall. She pulled me close, her warmth grounding me. I know you do, love, she murmured, her voice drowsy but full of understanding. But you've got me. You've got us. I closed my eyes, breathing in the soft, familiar scent of her rose-scented shampoo. I let it lull me toward sleep. It's okay, I whispered. Because I've got you. I've got you, she echoed, her voice soft and sure. I've got you. 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 The words slammed into me like a freight train. The cold air. The yellow suits. The hazmat men's arms catching me as I fell. The stink of chemicals and rot. I gasped. The smell of rose shampoo clung to my skin, but now there was something wrong with it. Something off. Like an optical illusion you can never unsee once you understand the trick. Pheromones. The truth slammed into me, a tidal wave that ripped through every lie I had clung to. I hadn't escaped. The wall had been digesting me all along. Showing me things. Letting me live out a perfect life while it worked its way through me, keeping me placated, feeding on my mind as much as my body. I looked at my reflection. I was a husk. Skin stretched taut over bone. Hollow eyes staring back at me, barely human. I wasn't in a warm, happy home. I was in a cold, empty apartment, staring out at a bleak, gray sky. I thought of Emily's smile. I thought of Lily's laughter. I wanted to go back.